The metagame so far in Disney Lorcana has been dominated by Ruby Amethyst. However, the next best deck or best decks in the game really have been undefined, which leaves the ability for many decks to kind of still say that that is their spot within the rise of the Floodborn metagame. Today, we might not be covering exactly those decks, but what we are covering is decks that have potential, that are different and interesting, and haven't seen much potential of play through the course of the entire metagame. But the fun thing about these decks is they're definitely new. They might be something different, something you haven't experienced yet, or a deck that just is missing one single piece potentially of being the next true breakout in the metagame. So let's get into 5 decks today that you haven't seen or haven't seen enough of just yet to be able to competently bring to an event near you and play and succeed in Disney Lorcana. Let's get into the decks. We're Mufasing around. This past weekend at Encounter Comics and Games, I went to the event which was presented as a Enchanted Takes All event. So the winner event was going to be able to choose an Enchanted that was in the case being held at Encounter Comics and Games. The number one target in the case was an Enchanted Belle, Strange But Not Special, which did go to the 4-0 winner of the event. This is a modified version of the deck that I played. The list that I played did not feature Mouse Armor or Hercules. Those are 2 additions to the deck. It also didn't feature 4 beasts. It was only 2. Throughout the games and the matches I played, I had discovered instead of playing more 2-ofs, I really wanted to focus on the best cards in the deck. And the best cards in the deck most certainly were Rapunzel, Mufasa, and the Beast. They came in very, very powerful and very, very strong. So I really wanted to make that a little more consistent. I also was playing Cinderella Stouthearted, and honestly, she was a complete bust. And because of that, I had to remove her, and I added Hercules. Hercules will add a layer to the deck that I believe is great moving forward. It's 2 resist for 6 cost with 6 strength is really something the deck was missing. Being able to trade into certain characters favorably was something I was very incapable of doing and definitely mattered in the games that I lost. But what this deck does incredibly well is pressure the game from literally turn 1 all the way until you win it. This deck, crazy enough, won more games on the draw than it did the play. In the one round that I actually won the die roll, my opening hand on the play was not very good, and my opponent's hand for him being on the draw was absolutely incredible. So I actually lost that game. On the day, I lost 3 of my 4 die rolls, and I won the 3 rounds in which I lost the die roll. Crazy enough, this deck won a ton of games on the draw on the back of Cinderella Ballroom Sensation. She really was an absolute beast for me. And playing 15 one-cost characters actually enabled me to be able to remove the 3 willpower characters before my opponent was able to utilize them correctly. In one game, I played Cinderella on the play. I went first, played Cinderella, then played 2 more one-cost, and removed my opponent's Olaf, and then they were unable to play another character until turn 4. Meanwhile, the entire time, I'm pressuring by gaining quests. I'm adding to the board for more characters. She really was very powerful, and Strength of a Raging Fire was an incredible addition as well. This deck truly is pedal to the metal, utilizing your one-cost characters for additional numbers of going wide as answers to Lady Tremaine, but then having all of the resist addition from the Prince and honestly Tiana. While Tiana is incredibly good at being a problem for certain decks and really trying to compete with it and trying to remove it, she's also just a 2 resist 2 lore character. And right now, Sapphire Steel is one of the more popular decks. This deck just has no answers to it. I will say the matchup against Ruby Amethyst can be kind of problematic if they just see Foxes and Mauis, as both Fox can answer the Prince on curve and Maui can answer Tiana. So it can be a little more annoying. The addition of Mouse Armor is to add a layer of protection, so your opponent can't simply get away with just having a 1-for-1 answer. They actually have to utilize other cards to interact with you. The final key piece here is Mufasa. That's right, I keep seeing Mufasa only played in decks with 5 or less non-character cards. I think that's ridiculous. I think everyone should be willing to gamble on Mufasa's ability and truly play roulette a little bit better in your favor. I understand the house always wins, but for me, as long as this card is more than a 50% odds, and in this particular list, it's well above that, I would even go to the extent of playing 15 non character cards and still be playing Mufasa. For one, I know this isn't the best response, but your opponent has no idea how many misses you have in your deck. So they're never going to know or even probably account for that when they're assessing how to deal with Mufasa. So even if he is just a 5 cost 3/3/2 lore, they still have to deal with him. And when they do, the added bonus of more often than not hitting and replacing himself with another character or one that's better, to me is something that more players need to get behind and really embrace moving forward in a meta game with the amount of board removal and board wipes we see, grab your swords, and of course, the wonderful be prepared. I believe this deck is in perfect position to pressure games early and just force opponents into making very uncomfortable plays. At a very good time playing this deck, and I do think it has an honest potential to be even better moving forward. Ruby Sapphire is a deck that has all the hype in the world built around it in a more formal way of control. The aggressive version of that deck really has never come to fruition and hasn't truly seen the light of day or been given the proper opportunity. The also realization that Grandpappy has the unique ability of gaining lore the turn he comes into play through a combo of cards can also be a true turning point for the game. This deck really does pressure the game incredibly well. What we have learned from Ruby Amethyst mirror matches is that Minnie Mouse has the ability to just hit play in multiples, turn sideways, and gain you so much potential lore that it's hard for your opponent to come back from. So adding an additional character to do that, like Noi, only adds the layer of potential for this deck. However, when in combination with the endgame that this deck presents through Gaston and Scar and Hades, having the backup removal from Teeth and Ambition, Lady Tremaine, and Maui all creates a wonderful world of only needing to really get to 12 or 14 lore with the ability to simply combo the game out later on with a Grandpappy, Mother Gothel, and Gumbo Pot play. This deck has the ability to honestly gain 10 lore out of nowhere with your opponent not even being able to react to it. Sometimes you'll play a Grandpappy and they just won't have the card for card answer for it on turn 7 because you're well protected with cards with ward or evasive or huge willpowers like Hiram. And with all of those things going on, more often than not, the one-for-one answer for Grandpappy. So when you follow up Grandpappy with lore with Grandpappy, then play Mother Gothel and a Gumbo Pot, all of a sudden you could just gain an insane amount of lore. The version of this deck could definitely be improved through more testing. However, at this point, I'm very comfortable sharing this list and telling players to just turn their card sideways and understand the power of Noi and Minnie Mouse to really bring home victories. This is the deck that in December, a teammate of mine, Colby, really spent some time on, enjoyed, and have a lot of fun with it. The playstyle, I was not a huge fan of the traditional control versions of Popsicles. I was looking for a way to pressure Ruby Amethyst into always having the cards they definitely needed to continue themselves and be even successful within the gameplay. This deck really does create problematic interactions. And I think it's very good into the natural metagame itself. Noi is an issue for so many decks. And this deck, utilizing cards like Gumbo Pot, even just as a actual repair one, would be surprising to anyone that picking up. I think it's a real fun deck to play. I definitely think if you haven't tried out this aggro version of this yet, I wrote an entire article on this as well that'll be in the description, but you should definitely give the aggro popsicle combo a true try. Bodyguard Bounce had a top 8 finish at SEG Con Cincinnati in their 2K, and this deck was one of the more crazy, unique decks on the weekend. showcasing cards like Hercules, the Prince, Donald Duck Musketeer as bodyguards to play a protector for your Maleficent's Biding Your Time, Pinocchio, Star Attractions, Arthur, and honestly, just following up the curve of even maybe the Huntsman. Adding in Jafar as a way to remove opposing evasive threats like Minnie Mouse, this deck really does simply look like a trick of all trades. I didn't make any modifications to this deck from the 60 card character list that was played at SCG-Con. I truly think that it's a deck that has real potential and even really brought inspiration for other aggressive decks on this particular list. The Amethyst bounce package has already been proven to work in an aggressive manner with Ruby and with Amber. Why not back it up with Steel with even more bodyguards to protect your early game threats, in addition to having the wonderful bounce package with the complementary Arthur? When this deck first hit a couple weeks ago and I reported on it, I was honestly blown away by the way it was built and the way it looks. It was very interesting to see and hear from the player that was successful from this and the team that worked on it. It's definitely a deck that I don't think many people even really know about or it's on their radar. So I would pick this up. I would play this at League this week. Try something different. Have some fun. You might even find it to be more competitive than you really think. You got to say, hey, 95 player top 8 of a 2K, this deck is real, and it definitely has real potential. If you're enjoying these decks so far, definitely hit that like button for me. Let me know in the comments, is there any off-meta things that you're playing, something new that you found in the metagame that you've really been enjoying? Definitely let me know if there's even a certain character card that you have found more success with lately. I'd love to know. If you're new to the channel and you're enjoying this video, please hit subscribe. Let's get to the rest of the decks. Are you a fan of Ruby decks or a fan of Steel decks, but maybe not vibing on any of the true better meta decks? Well, then this deck might definitely be for you. Ruby Steel Diver is a deck that our teammate and friend Psycho Smurf in the Discord has been using and playing with since the release of Rise of the Floodborn. As someone that is in a private chat room with him, seeing this deck develop over the weeks has been a real fun interaction for the team. Smurf really is never interested in playing the cookie cutter meta decks, so he's always looking to try to solve the meta in his own little way. This deck has had a true evolution through its existence. If you really want to see the true story of this deck and hear from Smurf himself, then you can check out the description below, as I will add the Lorcana.gg article that we posted last week so you can see and hear all about it from him. From my point of view, this deck does a lot of really interesting things, and it's playing some cards that definitely look like they're in every single deck, and then of course one Minnie Mouse Diver that looks a bit confusing. This is a Steel deck that's utilizing Zimber Future King and Cinderella to really shape in its hand early in the game, focusing on that more than anything, because the deck absolutely has the ability to be clunky with its uninkables. Of course, utilizing the Sawn package of Let the Storm Rage On, A Whole New World, Grab Your Swords, and Be Prepared really has the ability to kind of threaten the game in multiple different ways. Grab Your Swords is great against the super early aggressive, which this deck is representing several ways to play the card earlier. It also has really strong 5-cost singers when necessary. We don't have the ability of Amber to utilize Singer, but we do have cards like Maui and cards like Beast that can sing, and Shifted Tinkerbell, along with Shifted Aladdin when necessary. Utilizing Smash, of course, as a way to remove opposing pesky 3-cost characters. But the deck's interesting moments are Minnie Mouse Diver. Minnie Mouse Diver in a deck with 4, 8, 12, 18 actions seems probably harmless. But the 2-3 evasive character slowly and grindingly being able to just grant you 3 lore here and there in an evasive manner when paired with Minnie Mouse Surfer, who consistently gets you 2, does really go a long way in this game, in the game plan for this deck. Aladdin being able to swing, curve, and lure back in your favor is another proper edition. And of course, as always, the Beast, being all sad and lovely, granting you additional draw power throughout the game. This is a deck that I have watched grow, honestly, over the last 9 weeks. It's been fun hearing all the reports from Smurf. He's had a few 3-0 finishes in his league plays, a bunch of 2-1s, and then here and there he has had a bad day. He will say that the deck's biggest problem, sadly, is Amethyst bounce. So you got to take everything with a grain of salt and understand that this deck's biggest problem is likely the best deck in the game, which is probably holding this deck down quite a bit. But if you're really just looking for something different to play and something fun to do for a week at League, Rust might be in your favor. And yes, I call it Rust because I think it's hilarious. But in the end, it's just a fun Ruby Steel wheel deck that looks quite different than most of the steel wheel decks out there. Sapphire Steel Wheel. Now this deck is truly gained popularity over the last few weeks. It is a deck that we have been kind of testing for the last month or so. Our teammate Colby Jurish and his friends down in Florida have seen this deck truly take over some tournaments, but not being able to finish the events due to certain levels of inconsistency. This is the most updated version that we have for the deck. We really believe that Hercules is a key factor in the mirror match and in general. The deck just doesn't have a way to deal damage outside of direct damage spells from Smash or Let the Storm Rage On or Strength of a Raging Fire or Grab Your Swords if those are the versions that you're playing. But this deck is focusing on utilizing Smash and Grab Your Swords. So having the 6 strength and honestly potential of 3 resist or more from Hercules creates a threat in the game that most players will not have a great answer to. Hercules plus Cogsworth having resist 3 is really, really difficult, and it has just the ability of always being a 2-lore character when in doubt, but the ability to challenge anything in the game with 6 or less willpower, remove it, and then just sit there and play as your opponent stares at it going, how on earth I'm going to banish that, is definitely its fun potential. At its core, yes, this is a Cogsworth deck, but all of the surrounding and supporting cast really go a long way. I will say with the most recent uptick of opposing Steel Wheel players, I would likely be considering going up Benjins and trying to find room for more of those. It's also possible that Let It Go may need to be added to as well, because just cards like Smash and Grab Your Swords, and honestly even Tinkerbell in a meta with more Cogsworth are just not as good. I don't think I could ever get rid of Smash, but I would absolutely consider cutting down on Grab Your Swords and Tinkerbells to make more room for cards like Let It Go and Benjamin. So this version may not be the most up-to-date version of this list, but it's definitely a deck that we have had success with and we think is a true contender and threat to the metagame. 5 decks to try out before it's too late. In all honesty, before we know it, Into the Inklands will be here, and these decks might not ever be able to be played again. We don't know the difference of what locations can bring. We've really had a ton of Ruby Amethyst gameplay. We've had a ton of Steel Wheel Flutes or Lanterns. These are some of the decks that I don't think have gotten enough love and enough expression from the community to really take over. Some of them are homebrews from us. You know, the Amethyst or the Amber Steel deck, the Ruby Sapphire Popsicle Aggro combo, and of course the Ruby Steel deck are definitely homebrews for us that we like to enjoy and take with us to our local events here. I'm not saying that I could confidently bring them to like a 2K or something like that, but honestly, I brought it to an Enchanted event last weekend, and I would have brought any of the decks on this list to that event, in all honesty. I do think these are fun decks you should try out before it's too late. And of course, if you're looking for something better, you can check out this week's meta report, see what the best decks in the game were this week. But if you're looking for something new, I would definitely check out any of the 5 decks on this. I'll have them in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching today. If you haven't yet, smash that like button. If you enjoy these decks in any which way, let me know in the comments. And of course, make sure you hit subscribe if you're not. And we will catch you in the next video.